what I'm doing today is essentially about teaching awards. And the main issue is, for most staff, well, why should I bother with such things? Right? Life is hard enough. I'm under pressure to do research, to do publications. I've got to do all this teaching. Why should I try and fit something else in? All right, so why bother? So I'm here basically to sell teaching awards to you. But I hope you'll see that it's not just about an award, get a piece of paper, or a bit of money is always handy, all right? But it is something that actually feeds into your teaching expertise and the culture of teaching excellence that we hope to create at this university. The other thing I just want to note is that this tag team session, if you like, with myself and Parissa, the previous time we did this was the first time we'd actually done that one after the other. And I didn't know what Parissa was going to talk about in terms of details, and she hadn't heard what I was going to say before. And we just found an enormous amount of similarity and continuity in what we were saying. So I'm talking about awards, Parissa's talking about probation and promotion applications, and just feel the continuity, if you like, when we get to what Parissa has to say. It was quite an eye-opener to me, actually. It makes a lot of sense, but it was really, really encouraging. Okay, so that's me. I'm Doug. I'm the ADLT in SEIT and other bits of alphabet that I toss in there from time to time. My main field of work is in mathematics and statistics, in which I teach and do teaching-related research. However, I've got a foot on the other side of campus. My PhD was in theology, and when I do research, it's in theology that I do it. So I crunch the numbers and I write some stuff as well from time to time. I've been on the Teaching Awards Committee for a number of years. Just resigned from that very recently. Too much other stuff to do, unfortunately. But it is something that I care quite deeply about, and hopefully I can communicate some of that passion to you. I've also received a citation, Vice Chancellor's citation for excellence in enhancing learning, to give it its full title, I think. And so I've looked at life from both sides now, as the song goes, all right? So I've got a bit of experience on that side of it as well. You'll be pleased to know that when I submitted an application for a citation, I had no part whatsoever in the assessment of that application. Just thought I should toss that in. Okay, so why bother with awards? I guess at this point the other thing to mention is that I do have some handouts of these slides, but I'm not going to hand them out until afterwards. All right, so anything that turns up on the screen you will find on here. So if you want to take notes, don't take notes of what's on the screen. All right, it'll be the other stuff. But I want us just to be free to focus and to think about what we're talking about. So let's just do a bit of show and tell here, or share and care, or however you want to think about it. If someone said to you, teaching awards would be a good idea, what do you think the value of a teaching award would be? What might it be worthwhile for you personally?
For promotion?
Sorry?
Promotion.
For promotion or probation? Yeah, okay.
Like a proof of a leadership in this area of specialty in teaching.
Okay, yeah. Any other offers?
Recognition.
Recognition, okay.
Easy to move jobs. Easy to move jobs later.
Easy to get jobs later, yeah, okay, all right. Now I did bias the responses, sorry, I'll come back to that. Remind me of your name, I keep...
Paul.
Sorry?
Paul. Paul is Polychronis, but it's Paul.
Sorry, I knew I should remember.
No problem.
I did bias the responses by saying, what does it mean for you personally? But also think more broadly. What's the value of teaching awards for the institution and for students? Now, Paul, what were you going to say?
Yeah, actually, I was going to reply personally. It would possibly give me the chance to further improve my teaching through the award, because it also offers a grant, I think, that helps you to further improve your teaching. So that would be another gain.
Okay, you're thinking of that improvement in terms of the possibilities arising from the award itself, the grant that you would get.
Yeah.
Okay. So what if we expand this to institutional or student-related motivations?
Yeah, well, it creates some kind of competition between your staff to get that award, which
Competition
reflect
award,
that
yeah.
in terms of quality.
Okay. Yeah. That's kind of relates to the recognition thing that
I
you
mean-
mentioned, but it's a different thing in its own right. If we're competing for these things, and that's something that gives you status among your peers,
I mean, it will improve the quality of teaching.
improve the
of
quality of
everyone.
teaching of everyone.
All
All right.
standards within
Yeah.
the university will improve.
Okay.
It also gives give the institution some kind of recognition as far as the quality of the teaching.
Okay, institutional recognition, so surveys of student satisfaction, and we compete for students out in the marketplace, and so if Murdoch's got a good reputation for teaching based on, and the award contribute to that, then that would be quite valuable to the institution. Okay. I'm going to divide this up, and I'm going to be a bit controversial, at least I hope so. I hope we can have a nice little fight at some point along the way. All right. I'm going to divide it up into reasons that I think are important, reasons that I think are less important, and I'm going to talk about some institutional reasons as well. I think an important reason for teaching awards is that they flow out of and flow back into normal teaching practice. An ideal teaching award would be something that makes you do your normal thing only more so. It causes you to engage more deeply with your teaching, to reflect on it, to document it, to demonstrate it, achieve an award in view of what you're doing, and that process will then improve the quality of what you are actually doing. Right? Because what we're talking about in these awards is evidenced excellence in teaching. And so that means you will need to reflect on what is teaching excellence. To what extent do you demonstrate it? Where you don't yet demonstrate it, what are you doing to actually move in that direction? Right? So we hope that the teaching awards process will flow in that way, flow from and then feed back into your normal teaching practice. That's an ambition. It will in that way, and this is kind of follows on or is part of the first point, it shapes reflective teaching practice. And we hope that our teachers in this institution will approach teaching in the same way that they approach any other academic and scholarly activity. That is, they'll do so reflectively and critically. You don't just barge into research and read some stuff and write some stuff and send it off. You've really got to wrestle with what's going on, what's actually happening in these ideas or between these other authors or whatever else it might be, and where's the niche that I can contribute and actually make an original contribution. It's a very reflective, critical, self-critical process. And whatever you write, you will probably give it to a colleague to have a read through. Can you just check this over for me? Okay, tell me the typos, but what I really want you to do is critically engage with this idea that I've had and just tell me if I've explained that clearly enough. Have I made my case? Will it be catchy in this context and so on, all right? Now, we would like you to do the similar sort of thing with your teaching. How do I approach teaching? What's teaching actually for? What do I think learning is, and therefore what do I think teaching is? I've now taught a semester. How did that actually go? What worked? What didn't work? What do I need to improve? How would I know what I need to improve? Will I get a colleague to come in and review my teaching and give me some feedback and say, oh, look, this worked really well, but hey, that didn't engage the students so much and you may need to rethink how you actually teach them. Right? So think about the academic stuff that really turns you on, which may actually be teaching, right? And then think about teaching in the same way. That's basically what we want you to do, and we want the awards process to simply be an outcropping of that. Also, another important reason is it's good for your students. Right? If we're improving teaching quality, we're improving the student learning experience, hopefully actually improving the results and what students are actually gaining from that. Their challenges, their academic maturation, their grasp of the concepts, grasp of the real world in the way in which that is being mediated to them, through your teaching. Those are what I would consider to be important reasons for teaching awards. It's basically what would be good about teaching practice, and the teaching awards in theory are going to contribute to that good practice in teaching. Now, I'm going to suggest there's some unimportant reasons, right? And this is where I'll focus on the probation and promotion stuff. To me, that's kind of a side effect. Right? It's certainly not what motivates me in my teaching practice. However, it sure is handy when I come to apply for a probationary review, as I did a year ago. Right? And then the teaching evidence and the awards process actually fed into that very strongly, and you'll hear from Carissa just how that connects. It helps you find another job, as Hamid said, right? Very practical, grassroots stuff, but that's again is not really what motivates me about excellence in teaching, and hence it's not really what motivates in terms of the awards. It also brings in a bit of funding. It's not stratospheric, all right? We'll talk about that in a moment. So, but a couple of $1,000 or $4,000 here or there is always useful. Thank you very much. You get a domestic conference out of a small one, or maybe towards an international conference out of a larger one. There's also some institutional motivations, and these tie in more with what I thought were the important reasons. Teaching and research, the activity, the enterprise of scholarship, teaching and research. So teaching is part of Murdoch's core business. Right? It is core business in the same degree and to the same extent that research is. And so we need to do stuff that actually promotes excellence in that core business. So thinking of it from a business point of view, and sure, various people complain about how businessy universities are becoming, but as long as we understand ourselves as being in the business of scholarship, which is its own thing, and not like any other business, then personally I don't see a problem. So, but this is core stuff that we do. We do want to, and this was brought out by Paul and Hamid, we want to identify leaders of teaching excellence. Right? So who would be those who stand out as leaders, who would then be natural mentors for those who may have an issue with their teaching or are less confident in their teaching, who need a bit of advice and so on. So it's always handy having leaders, having acknowledged experts. And primarily for the institution, it's good for students. What's good for students keeps them engaged, keeps them progressing in their course, is certainly good for Murdoch as an institution. So the institutional and student-related stuff tends to line up, and some of the personal stuff, the stuff that we most readily think of, promotion, finding a job and so on, I tend to deprecate a bit, and I really encourage people that teaching is something that you need to find value in for its own sake. That's what really drives excellence. That's also going to make you look very good as a job prospect or as a promotion candidate, but I do suggest those things should not be your prime motivations. Anyone want to toss anything back at me about that? Yeah.
From your perspective, what would be the single most important factor to have a teaching excellence, to be a quality teacher?
The single most important factor. Well, there's a very politically incorrect response to that. It came from a high school teacher, a chap who taught in private schools in Melbourne. He was giving a seminar, an in-service training seminar to other high school teachers. And he was there as the senior, the expert. He'd received multiple awards. He was going to give the pearls of wisdom. And he looked at the audience and he said to them, basically, chaps, you've got to like the little buggers. You have to like students. Really, really important. Okay? So you are teaching for their sake. Right? Now, if that's the case, I suggest that a lot of the other stuff becomes rather easier. Right? But if teaching is a chore, it's always going to be uphill. It's always going to be hard. Right? So one of the primary things to me is actually motivational, to find your joy in teaching, if you like. Right? Now, the way you find joy in teaching may be different from the way I do, but you have to be there for the students and to enjoy it. And one of the challenges for me, as I say to my students every semester, I say, how many of you are here because you want to be? I've got about 400 students, right? Practically no hands go up, because this is a compulsory first year statistics unit. Everyone's there because they have to be, because their course tells them they have to be. Right? How many of you expect to enjoy it? Practically no hands go up. And how many of you feel anxious about it? 90% of the hands go up. This usually raises a laugh, because they realise, oh, hey, everybody's feeling bad just like I am, But that's part of the context, and so I'll tell them, right. So I'm here to get you to enjoy and engage with this in spite of yourselves. So there's the challenge, but we're all in it together from that point. Right? But yeah, that motivational stuff I think is really, really important. Thanks for the question. Okay.
Doug?
Oh, sorry, another one. Go. Yeah.
I will be a little bit controversial
Good.
about this award, because I had this lecture 2 weeks ago with the students. I had 2 students after the lecture that basically say thanks to me, just personally, and that was my award. So for me, this kind of a piece of paper, putting some sort of the award and get award because you apply for award, it's taken from fame, and it doesn't mean anything. Because a real award is just the fact that you contribute to the thinking of young people.
Absolutely.
Not to get some piece of papers to get promoted or anything.
Absolutely. John, you're a man after my own heart. Okay? And so my challenge then from your point of view is to say, all right, if it's the teaching and that feedback from students is its own reward, all right, then how can an actual formal award actually contribute to that? All right, and that's something that I definitely do want to address. Okay. Let's talk about the award applications themselves, and by looking at some of those details, we'll start to see how we can actually make that link and see the award as contributing to teaching quality and hence to that kind of response from students. The basic thing here is narrated, evidenced story of teaching practice. You have to tell a story. This is what I do, this is where I started, this is how I developed, and so on, and it needs to be evidenced. And we'll talk about sources of evidence in a moment. And the details that you want here, if I can just get the mouse to work, and hopefully the web browser will come up. Oh, look at that. Technology is great when it works. Despite our addiction to educational technology here, I'm somewhat sceptical that it always works when you click, and that comes from long experience. Okay, so if you look at the educational development website, there's the grants and rewards information there, and heaps of information. Whoops, that's OLT. Went to the wrong one. The VC's Learning and Teaching Awards, those are the ones that I want to talk about today. Alright, so you can find heaps and heaps of information there, some of which I'm about to summarise. Right, but I just wanted to draw attention to that, because that's the source for the stuff you actually want. Essentially, there are four criteria of teaching quality. Right? And these, broadly and very briefly, there's a much more detailed story of these. We want approaches to learning and teaching, especially those approaches that motivate and inspire students to learn. Maybe your thing is in development of curriculum, development of resources, or services provided to students that help them to learn. And so there's a spot in there not just for academics, but also for support staff. Maybe you've got some innovative assessment and evaluation practices. And those practices serve to improve learning and teaching in your unit. Or perhaps you are showing innovation, leadership of a teaching team, say for a large unit, or scholarship of teaching, that is researching learning effectiveness and publishing in that area, that also supports learning and teaching. Now, these have, just to come back to, very keen for us to do that. Okay, so these criteria come from the Australian Awards for University Teaching, formerly known as the OLT Awards. I'll just, if I can get the mouse to behave, which it doesn't want to. Thank you. Right. So there's quite a lot of extra detail in there, so I was brutally summarising these things, but these are the 4 main areas with lots of different examples. These are not exhaustive lists, all right, in terms of the examples that could actually come under each of those criteria. All right, so there's quite a wide range. And so the idea is that we have our criteria aligned with the National Teaching Excellence criteria, and so awards that are made within the university, we then say, oh, that was a really good one, with a bit of tweaking you could apply for a national award. Right? In other words, oh, congratulations, you've been successful, here's some more work for you to do. Right? That happened to me last year when I got the citation. Oh, by the way, you've got a week to apply for the national award. Gee, thanks. So it's not all joy, but it certainly is part of the process. All right. So what do we have to do to actually apply for these things? Well, there's 2 levels. There's an entry level, and there's the all singing, all dancing higher level. So the citation is the entry level. That's where we'd encourage anyone to start who's wanting to look at the teaching award. For the citation, you would need to address one criterion, one of those 4 that I just mentioned. You need a 4-page statement, again, narrated, evidenced, teaching excellence. 2 1-page references, one of which would be from your school dean, and a CV. And there's a $2,000 prize, 4 of which are awarded each year. There is a little bit of flexibility on that. If we just bowled over by 6 fantastic applications, then the committee would lobby the Vice-Chancellor to make an extra couple available and so on, all right? But it's typically up to 4, but we can stretch that if the quality is there. The award, as distinct from citation, this means you're excellent in teaching across the full range of criteria. So you need to address all 4 criteria. It'll be an 8-page statement, 2 1-page references, a CV, and supporting materials where relevant. Some people turn in videos as well, or evidence of assessment instruments that they've constructed that were innovative, and those sorts of things. This has a larger prize, $5,000. I think I mentioned $4,000 before, so I was wrong. I did check these numbers last week. So it's $5,000 prize. 2 are available each year. And again, you know, if the quality is there, the committee would agitate for an extra award.
Sorry, Doug, can I interrupt?
Yeah.
Could you just address the references, because they're awarded points as well.
Yes.
In the assessment, so they've got to speak specifically to what, generally speaking, in relation to the application. It's not a personal reference. It's a reference.
It's not a personal
focused
reference.
on.
It's a reference in relation to that person's contribution as a teacher. And it'll be in terms of the excellence of their teaching, the acknowledgement of that excellence among their peers and within the school and further afield, and the manner in which, the extent to which and the manner in which that excellence has been sustained over a period of time. Those are the 3 main overarching things that should be in the reference, and the things that are looked for by those who assess the awards.
Thank you.
Yeah. But again, heaps more detail on that available on the website that we looked at. Okay. So we've talked about the criteria. We've talked about the 2 different levels of award. The temptation is that people apply for the big one because it's worth more money. In practice, it's very hard to actually get that first up. You know, there's a genre in which you write. This evidence narration of teaching excellence is not something most people are used to. So my strong advice is to start with the citation.
How many people apply for these awards per year?
Varies quite a lot. 10 to 15 for the citations, and another maybe 10-ish, usually not as many, for the awards. We used to get far too many people skipping the citations and going for the awards, and then a lot of those applications weren't very good, quite frankly. All right, we're really trying to emphasise people should try the citation. Try the citation first. Yes.
A lot of us have only been at Murdoch for less than a year,
Yep.
so how long do you have to have been at Murdoch, and how does your prior teaching experience at other institutions contribute to this application, or is it mostly based on experience teaching here at Murdoch?
Okay, yeah. Now we have a problem here in terms of the Murdoch Awards are for teaching excellence at Murdoch. Okay, so that creates a problem for those who are brand new right now, right? The national awards apply for teaching excellence anywhere. But it's kind of weird to say, oh, well, you don't meet our criteria, but you should go straight to a national award. That's actually probably not a very wise thing to do, because the national awards have a higher standard. The thing that's important to still appreciate now is that if you're going to collect evidence, you need to build that evidence collection into your normal teaching practice and be doing that along the way. To get to, 3 years now, I've got 3 years of teaching experience, it's time to apply for an award. Pity I didn't collect any evidence. That creates a very awkward situation, and it's just almost impossible to collect stuff in retrospect, right? And we'll talk a bit about that now. So, what sources of evidence would you have? There's student surveys, comments and the scores, right? Now, they are of, people debate the value of those, but getting what the students think, it doesn't tell you the quality of their education, it tells you something about the quality of the student learning experience, right? Which is a different thing. So for what it does, it of course is a source of evidence. Unsolicited emails from students and others. If you're in a large unit, you have multiple tutors and so on, you may get comments from your tutors about, oh, thanks for your help with this worked really well, and so on. And you may get appreciative emails from former students. Right, those who said, oh look, that unit, I'm just so glad I took that because now I'm applying this, blah, 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 and you gave me an insight, etc. So what you need is a slush folder, right, on your own home drive or wherever, labelled good stuff or testimonials, and every time you get one of those, you just drag it across there and drop it in. And make sure you give it a name that's reasonably intelligible, and so you've got that. And every time you get one of those, it should go in there. So there is a place you can go to find that stuff. Peer reviews of teaching. Right? And this is something you need to ask a colleague to do. Come and sit in on some classes, look over your unit information, have a talk to you about what your teaching philosophy is and so on. Feedback from teaching colleagues. Well, that sort of duplicates what I mentioned about tutors or those who co-coordinate with you if you're team teaching in a unit. The unit results themselves. After all, we're trying to get our students to learn. That's what teaching's about. If you're a successful teacher, then presumably that would have some impact on the unit results, bearing in mind that, hey, there's a lot of other variables in there as well. There's the quality of the cohort from year to year, and all those kinds of things. Lots of things over which you have no control, but it may be that something you try out will crop up in improved unit results. There would be downstream acknowledgement, and by that I mean the students that you teach, unless this is the final year unit, they will go on to further study in some other unit. And so colleagues who then teach those same students, they will have a view on how well those students have been prepared. Right? You've been teaching these students, do they notice any difference in the quality of the knowledge that the students come into their unit with from your unit, right? So those people there who are expecting the students to have certain concepts and skills, do they actually have them? What's their view of how well that's going? There may be, if you're doing teaching-oriented research, and you may have publications in that area. Most of the disciplines have journals of education, right? Journals of maths education, statistics education, even physics education. You'll find specialist teaching-related journals in most of the discipline areas, and you may want to do some action research on your own teaching, try an innovation, gather data, report on that and publish that. Key thing is don't collect evidence just for an award. That's actually the worst reason to collect evidence. The idea is that you'll collect evidence because this is part of your standard reflective teaching practice. How do you improve? Right, the student survey comments that said, no problems, thanks, nice to know, but it's basically useless, right? The student comments that say, oh, I loved everything, that's nice, but it doesn't give you anything to do, it gives you a warm, fuzzy glow, all right, which is always nice. But the comments that are thoughtfully critical, those are the ones that are actually quite useful. The ones that are abusive are hard to handle and you have to try and ignore them, all right? So you need to be selective in what you attend to. But I find quite a number of students are thoughtfully critical about what's going on. Oh, that was okay, but this really didn't work. You need to change that, and so on. And so if you pick out the things that are highlighted by students, then every time you offer a unit, there'll be something in there, oh, maybe I should think about how I actually put that across. Change this activity a little bit. Right? And if you're changing one or two things from time to time, you'll be continually improving your teaching. Now, of course, that's easier if you have charge of a unit over successive offerings, and in some schools that's normal, and in some schools it's not. Right? And so if you're rotating the leadership of a unit among different staff in successive semesters or offerings, then achieving continual improvement can be more difficult, right? But that may be something to raise with an academic chair, head of discipline or ADLC. I've been in the privileged position with my unit, I've been doing that every semester for 5 years. Right? So continuous improvement has its own payoffs, as Piotr was mentioning. I can see student satisfaction improving. I know if I tweak this, it'll probably improve things a bit more, and so on. Not everybody has that advantage. Some people would see it as a bit of a drain. Teaching a big unit every semester, hey, when are you going to get time for other stuff? Well, fair enough, but win some and lose some in most of these things.
Just before you move on, Dan,
yes,
just an unrelated question, but about the student survey. Who are they available to?
Who are they available to?
I mean, if you request one, who gets to see them and who doesn't?
Okay. The surveys, there's two kinds of surveys. There's a unit survey, and every unit is surveyed with every offering. Right? That happens automatically. You can request particular additional questions to be asked, but the survey will happen with the core questions at least. Right? Now, the results of that are reported to you in full as unit coordinator, including all the comments. The numerical scores are reported to people like your school dean, ADLT, head of discipline. Maybe academic chair, but I'm not sure if it goes that far down. Not academic chair. Thanks, Marissa. I wasn't aware of that. I know they come to me as ADLT, but I don't get to see the comments, which sometimes I think is a bad idea.
And I'm not sure if it goes automatically to all of head of disciplines.
Okay.
It goes via the school.
So what about the teaching survey?
The teaching surveys, they happen only if you request them.
Yeah.
Right? And again, there's some standard questions and optional questions that you can request. If you're particularly interested in, I've changed the LMS site in this particular way. you might want to get student feedback on that and so on. Once again, with those, those results, the numerical stuff and overviews are reported to the Dean, the ADLT, and the actual comments from students go only to you as the person requesting the survey. Now, if you request a teaching survey in respect of tutors in your unit, right, a similar division applies. Right? In fact, if as unit coordinator you want to survey the teaching of all the tutors in your unit, you actually don't get to see their teaching results, right? Unless you then go and ask your ADLT, can I have access to the numerical scores? Right? And he'll probably say yes, but he can't give you the comments because he doesn't have them. Right? So I think they're a little bit precious about who gets access to what. You would think the school dean, they've got overall responsibility for what goes on in the school. They should have access to the comments. Mostly they don't want to read them, but you would think that they should have access.
And so these award committees, I appreciate that there's a bit of a problem if you can choose whether you want the teacher survey or not.
Yep.
But of course you have a feeling for whether the unit is popular or not, right? And so these, and I suppose in the probation criteria it says you need to be consistently positive feedback. So if you are teaching a unit that's not popular,
Yep.
are you better off not to get a teacher survey or not?
Yeah, well, with respect, I would say that the question, that's actually the wrong question. Right? I would say that the question you should really ask is it possible that in the end your students will be better off if you get that survey and respond to any issues of teaching quality which emerge from that? Right?
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Of course, really the purpose of this survey is to make the unit better or the teaching better, but there is that implication that where the committees take into account that, I mean, are you better off if you have 5 surveys that are all excellent, or are you better off if you have 5 surveys that are excellent?
Marissa's dying to make a comment.
So am I.
Yeah, Marissa?
I try not to hide anything. That's the worst case scenario that could happen to you, because at least in probation and promotion committees, they have access to the teaching and unit surveys of everyone, not the comments, but they have access. And if it's very easy to get suspicious, is that if you list the units that you teach, and you've been teaching over 3 years of probation, and suddenly you provide all the teaching surveys, but for one of the units, then there is going to be a big question mark next to that. Provide the survey results and make sure that you provide a narrative around it. Is that why you think are the reasons for the lower scores? I mean, teaching awards could be different, but with probation, no.
Pretty similar, actually.
If it's similar, then
So if we've got what appears to be highly selective choice of which units you get surveys for, then the awards committee would wonder why. I mean, it's always the case in these things because you're choosing what data you put in, right? So it's always self-selected data.
But it's not only what data you put in, but it's also what data you have collected. With the teacher surveys, because you are offered the choice, do you want it collected or not?
that's even worse if you don't collect it. That will be your responsibility, actually.
So why is there then the option of not collecting it? Let me put it that way.
Well, with the unit surveys, there's no option.
That's true, but with the teacher
But with the
surveys.
teacher surveys, there is. And I kind of wonder why that distinction is. But on the other hand, I feel sorry for the students that tend to get a bit surveyed out. And if that happens, then they get tired of answering survey questions and the quality of the data falls. So there's a bit of a trade-off there. Hamid, sorry, look, there's various questions here.
That was my question.
That was your question? Okay, Diego?
I actually request the teaching survey, and that was not the purpose of this probation. It just, I put a lot of people and I try to get feedback from students, I'm going okay or not. That was just my purpose. And I think that this teaching, particularly individual one, is actually more useful because the unit survey, it's affected by quality of tutors, how much money they input towards the like support of students. If there is no money, students complain. We need to have more support, but we cannot provide more support because there is no money. And the second one, it's really reflect how are you going, and it's not affected really by all these kind of the things that are in the background, and it's not really related to you. And that was my intention was just really how I'm going. You put a lot of people, is it good, or I need to do something else? And that teaching was actually more important for me than the other one.
Yeah, I'm not questioning the usefulness of it. I'm just questioning why can you why can you unselect the teacher? So
Yeah, I would question that as well. But yeah.
Part of the narrative, just picking on what Chris was saying in terms of that narrative, and what Doug had pointed to earlier, is this reflective practitioner. So if I've got a teaching survey that is not necessarily glowing or is showing that I could make some improvements, actually I do want to put that in there because part of the narrative is, look, I got this bad teaching survey for this particular unit. On reflection, I've now done this, this and this in terms of the unit. Perhaps I've had a survey in the interim and there was some increase up or down. But what I'm trying to demonstrate to the committee in this case is I'm using this information to inform my practice, and hopefully I can demonstrate over time an improvement in terms of the feedback that I'm getting from those students in that unit. So,
and that is an extremely valuable, right? This is demonstrating I'm someone who cares about quality of teaching. I request to get feedback and data on the quality of teaching, and as appropriate, I respond to that feedback. I can acknowledge my shortcomings and I can work on them. Right? That is actually much more positive than someone who just sends in all good news and say, here I am, I'm fantastic. Right? Because that doesn't tell us, does this person reflect on their teacher, or was it just a fluke? Right? So that narrative, that development, personal development, you don't want all good news. You want ability to work through issues and improve. Very definitely. Now, Paul, you're very patient.
Yeah, no problem. I have a couple of questions. First of all, surveys take place at the end of the semester, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and they are electronic and compulsory for the students?
They are electronic, they are not compulsory.
So that means that you might have very few students actually
You have the danger of selection bias. Now,
okay.
Because of the nature of student cohorts, your response rate will tend to be characteristic of your unit.
Okay.
Right? Some kinds of students are more likely to respond than others.
What are the what's the average response rate?
Average response rate is probably somewhere around 30%.
Ah, so it's low.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean that's lower than I would like. Typically in statistics we would say if you've got a voluntary response and the response rate's lower than 70, don't take it too seriously. And it's for that reason, okay, I do look at the numbers, but it's the comments I actually pay more attention to. Right? But so 30% is about what I get in my unit. Some other units get more, 50 or 60%, but that's actually not very common.
Okay. Second question, if you're like me, so it's a personal question, teaching a small unit, not many students this semester, does it make sense to ask for a teaching survey, or is the unit survey actually, and if you're teaching it yourself, or is the unit survey actually the same as the teaching survey?
Yeah, if you're the only teacher in the unit,
yeah.
okay, then you would have to say, yeah, there's quite a lot of overlap between the two,
Okay.
but they do ask different questions, right, as Piotr was reflecting on that, all right? So the unit survey is about the overall experience, the quality of the learning materials, was LMS used appropriately, all those kinds of stuff.
Are there questions about the teacher in the unit survey? Are there questions about the teacher in the unit survey?
Not specifically.
but you can add questions.
You can add questions about teaching, right, in the unit survey, but you're probably better off relying on the teaching survey if that's what you want.
And final question, how do you ask for it?
How do you ask for it?
For a teaching survey.
Okay, there's my feedback is the link. Do you advertise that in terms of the surveys? I mean, I'm not.
No, actually, there is an email always
Yeah.
coming along.
There's an email
By
that's sent out
mid-semester.
around about week 5 or 6 every semester,
Okay.
right? And you will get that. But I can certainly provide those details to Craig and put them up on the LMS site.
Thank you.
It's also a good custom just to ask the students, because there can be a problem with survey. You can ask on the last lecture, I am next lecturer, can you actually fill the survey? Just, talk to the students. They keep in mind that you just ask them
Okay.
nicely
Yeah.
to do this, because you can get like 5 guys or 3 guys, and it's just very difficult to. I asked.
Okay.
Yeah, just quickly, you said before that things vanish. So my teaching surveys from last semester, I read them, but I don't know if I saved them. So are they gone forever?
No.
Or are they're always there?
No,
Okay, that's fine.
They are there on the My Feedback site. I mean, it used to be called MOS, Murdoch Online Student Surveys. Now it's under this
MIBS or something.
My Feedback name. But yeah, I'll just find those links. But I've got a link I can go to, right? And it's got all my surveys.
Every course you ever taught
Yeah.
here? Okay,
Everyone
no,
that
that's
was
good
ever
to know.
surveyed. It's
Okay.
all there. Download that as a PDF or whatever. Yeah, no, that was another one.
I just have a reflection about the colleague comment about asking the student,
Yeah.
because it was my first teaching survey and I was really so desperate to have feedback.
Yeah, of course.
So it was opened for a certain time, usually till June or something. And I was every couple of days checking online, so I find only like one student filled anything, and the semester was finishing, so I was keep sending the student nice emails about please, feel free, it's up to you, but please give me comments for my own improvement. And almost till the end of the semester, it was like 5 students only filled on the online survey.
Out of how many?
Out of something like 85.
Oh, yeah.
But
Yeah.
the student, in my experience, tend to fill in the survey after the exam. So they just wait till they get the exam, and if they're happy about the exam, so they go and really fill in the online survey. And really after the exam, I get something like 40 something.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So this gap in time about waiting and anticipating, and then suddenly after the exam finished, and apparently they were happy about the exam, so they start to get the feedback. So I don't know if from your experience, is it a way for the student also, if they are not happy about the exam, they could give another feedback. If they are happy about the exams, they could give a certain feedback. So
Yeah, I mean, that effect is one of the reasons why some people discount student surveys entirely. Right? They say, oh, look, it's basically either a popularity contest or it's about whether they got good results. Okay? But when people actually crunch the numbers on that, there's not much correlation between student satisfaction and results. Now, we've got a couple of comments that came up just at that point. But yeah.
I was going to say, in some university, student survey are mandatory, and student marks aren't released before they have to complete the survey. And once they complete, then their marks are released, so they cannot base their survey on the mark.
Well, our surveys close before the release of results. Right?
But what's the motivation?
But they're not compulsory.
But what's the motivation for having it close after the exam rather than a week before the exam?
No, but in matter they are closed before the exam.
But he was just saying he got surveys after.
Our surveys close after the exam, but before the results come out.
So they knew what they.
So they've sat the exam but haven't got the
The
feedback.
exam is part of the learning experience. All right?
But surely you would want a student to judge the quality of an exam, right?
Why not?
Because isn't that the purpose of an exam?
It's part of the learning experience in the unit, and also you shouldn't. I disagree with those who discount student responses and say it's all about popularity or did they feel good about the exam or whatever. In my experience, that's not what students.
I'm
do.
not discounting them. I'm just asking whether by closing it before the exam, we wouldn't get, we wouldn't eliminate that bias of students who are unhappy about.
On the other hand, students can often see the survey as a distraction from actually studying for the exam, and which I think is a fair enough point of view as well. Now, sorry, you've been very patient at the back. You were wanting to make a comment.
I have a practical question.
Sure.
I also have, I think it's better to close it after the exam because, as you said, I mean, there are exams that are not actually examining what you taught in the course, so I think it should play a role how good the course fits with what you're actually assessing, and I think students should be able to evaluate that. But my practical question is, so my school is very into team teaching, so we have like units and we have all sorts of people teaching into that unit, so which means that we have reduced hours of actually contact with the students. And as I understood from last year, there's a minimum amount of hours you have to have contact with the students to get the teaching survey for your teaching, and this doesn't go together because I couldn't get the teaching survey for my teaching because I only taught 4 hours and not the 5 that were requested. So I'm
That
at a
certainly
loss.
is,
So what?
that certainly is a practical issue. In that context, it's going to be very hard to get good teaching-oriented feedback there. And also because you've got a multiple number of different teachers, guest lectures, whatever else, people doing seminars and so on, then you get students to give feedback on one of those 15 different people that they've seen. Are they going to be commenting on the right person? Right? So the quality of the response is going to be questionable as well. I mean, I find that even in my unit, I get occasionally students will give comments about particular tutors. Right, they'll name them in their comments. Sometimes that's not very nice, and sometimes it is. And one of the not nice comments mentioned a tutor by name who I'd never heard of before, from a completely different unit. Right, so obviously the student was upset, but were they upset about my unit? I'm really very dubious about that. And so even though we didn't have that problem, we have lots and lots of different teachers. It raises data quality issues. But if it's something you want to take up with the survey people, because they actually do provide some other options, and they can provide you with your own surveys too, and then you can do something in a class.
But I would like to learn about my teaching, especially because I'm an accent and all these sorts of things that come into them. But I also don't want to bother the students to have to fill in 50 surveys, so I understand this trade-off there, but it's...
But I mean, I can do no more at the moment than say, yes, I agree it's a practical issue. Team teaching, especially if it's shared among a large number of people, creates real problems in terms of assessing the teaching. Exactly how to deal with that, I don't really know, because I'm not actually that much of an expert on the survey process.
Doug, can I
team teaching anyway.
Can I make a comment to that? Most of my teaching has been small group teaching, disassociated from units and things like that, so it's very, very difficult, and I've, like Doug, have been awarded the citation as well. So I've been through this process. So when I'm facilitating workshops with students, it could be 6 students, it could be 15 students, it could be 1 hour, 2 hours, I actually take my own survey. Now, some of the questions I might take from the teaching survey, but that feedback still counts as evidence then. And I can talk to that feedback, and in the narrative, and you must never forget that you contextualise this within the narrative. And within the APDR, again, that's why I talk about the context being really important. So if it's a team teaching environment, this is what I've done, these are the feedback results I've got, this is how I've responded to these in terms of reflectors practice. So you're not necessarily barred from gathering feedback in multiple forms to use to support this case that you're a reflective practitioner and that you're making improvements to your teaching practice.
Thanks very much, Craig. Well, I'm really going to have to push on because I'm pretty much I am at the end of my part of the time. I haven't actually finished yet, and I don't want to be too disrespectful to Marissa. All right, but the whole evidence thing as part of reflective practice, don't do it just for an award. one, it won't work, and two, we really want the award to be the award process to be an outcropping of normal practice. That's the hope. So we talked about evidence. That evidence needs to be narrated, the story as Craig was just talking about. And think of this in terms of stuff that you do. So what actions illustrate and demonstrate your achievement in relation to whatever criterion of excellence you are addressing. Right? This action was taken in response to some particular situation. You saw students weren't getting this particular concept. How did you re-engineer the learning experience in that? So what did you do? What was the outcome? And how are your reflection, action and outcome related to your teaching philosophy? Right now, Craig will be doing some work with you on developing a teaching philosophy. It really helps if that serves as a basis. There's also a feedback loop here. You have an understanding of what learning and teaching actually are, that in some way will shape what you actually do. Your experience in doing that, in turn, is going to feed back into your understanding of what learning and teaching actually are, and so on, right? And the idea is that will hang together. Your development will establish, your development over time will be narrated as the story of you as a teaching academic. Right? And so while the narration is important, it has to be evidenced narration. Right? So those two things have to be there. Not just the evidence, not just a story, it has to be evidenced narration. And on surveys, and I was wanting to get away from surveys because I'm not an expert on the actual process, and we've had some really good practical questions raised about that. Don't include surveys, don't include tables of survey results. I'm a statistician, I can read data. In the context of an award application, tables of numbers are really boring, right? Try graphs. Right? There's different ways of doing it. If you've got stuff over time, use a line graph. You can see how things develop over time, different offerings of the unit. There are various ways of doing that stuff. But don't just put the tables of numbers in, especially with standard deviations, as if they are self-explanatory, because they are definitely not. Even people like me who are used to reading numbers, right? There's very few real statisticians on the awards committee. Right? But any problems that are there in the numbers, right? Say something about them. It's part of the story. Oh, that didn't look too good. What was behind that? What comments related to that? What action did you take? Right? How can you respond to issues that may be apparent? Okay, so just to sum up, again, teaching is core business at Murdoch. It's important. We want people to treat it as important. An aspirational statement. Why awards? Because the awards and the whole application process are outcrops from a bedrock of reflective teaching practice. Right? A teaching practice that we hope will become deeply embedded in Murdoch's academic culture. Right? In other words, we don't want the teaching award process to be special. We want it to be an outcropping of the normal. So it's an aspirational statement, but it's really what the awards are here for. And also for the reasons that a number of you highlighted. If we highlight best practice, we're providing inspiration to motivated teachers, and maybe we'll motivate some who are as yet less motivated. Right, sorry for the rush towards the end. We'll pick up one of these handouts here later, and I'll hand over to Carissa now.
Just one question.
Carissa, is that okay?
Yes.
Okay.
Mine is going to be short.
Sorry.
The teaching scholars will be more competitive for these awards than 40, 20 academics, because we are all doing only 40% of the teaching, so we don't have that much time for teaching, and we are doing research and service. But whereas teaching scholars are devoting more towards teaching, so do you think that they are more competitive for these awards, for these teaching awards?
No, I don't. We've had quite a number of really excellent award applications from 40, 20 people. Some of them, their teaching story is so fantastic, you think how did they ever get research done? I thought they were doing research as well. But yeah, we don't really pay any attention. We certainly don't pay any attention to, is this person a teaching scholar or a 40-40-20 academic, right? It's all about what's actually there in the evidence. The 40-40-20s, they won't have as much opportunity to gather evidence. That's fair enough, all right? But it's about the quality of evidence.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruce.